Well, chapter 4 of the book of Ezekiel is going to get into some more revelation. So remember, in the last chapter, Ezekiel was told to go back home, wait a little bit. We'll have some more messages to deliver in a little while. Let's let the people cool off a little. They're not happy with you right now. So in chapter 4, Ezekiel's going to teach through some metaphors. Basically, he's going to do some things. He's being told to do some things, and through doing those things, it's going to be a metaphor for the people to help them understand what this message is that God is giving to him. So verse 1, thou also, son of man, take thee a tile. Okay, this would be like a clay tablet. And lay it before thee, and portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem. So this would be taking like a clay, well, we would call it like it look like a tile, like a square rectangular piece of clay that's been fired and hardened. Maybe not fired and hardened all the way yet, but you're able to scratch on it or draw on it. So if it's fired and hardened, he's etching onto it or scratching into it. If it's not fired and hardened, he could be drawing into it, then firing it later. But take a tile, and most likely it'll probably be one that's been fired, but he's going to draw on this. I want you to draw a depiction on this, or carve into it, scratch into it, a depiction of the city of Jerusalem. Verse 2, and lay siege against it, and build a fort against it, and cast a mound against it. Set the camp also against it, set battering rams against it round about. So he's drawing a depiction of the city of Jerusalem and an invading army sieging it. So they're surrounding it. They've got forts they've built up around outside of Jerusalem, probably even a wall around them to encase people in. They've got ramps to come up against to the sides of the wall to try to get up. They're building mounds of dirt up to build up a ramp of earth and dirt, as well as ramps built of wood that are there, basically. So they're getting ready to invade Jerusalem. So that's what he's depicting on that tile. That's the what he's drawing. Verse 3, moreover, so here's something else. Take thou unto thee an iron pan, and set up for a wall of iron between thee and the city, and set thy face against it, and it shall be besieged, and thou shalt lay siege against it. This shall be a sign to the house of Israel. So the iron pan represented the wall that the Chaldeans erected around Jerusalem during their siege. It prevented escape and allowed no entry of supplies. That's from the Old Testament Study Manual. So when you look at this, so you've got this tile with the depiction of Jerusalem and all the siege stuff going against the walls. Then he takes the iron pan and kind of sets it on it to kind of show like there's this idea of there's this big wall that's going to go around all of that. So when sieges would happen, again, the army would surround them, and it wasn't uncommon to build a wall around them. This actually happened in 70 AD when Rome came down to siege Jerusalem. They cut all the trees down. They built a big wall around it. So anybody who tried to flee the city of Jerusalem would get caught with the second wall, and they couldn't get out. And the Roman soldiers would find them. In 70 AD, anybody that was found inside that no man's land between the city of Jerusalem's wall and the wall that the Romans built, they were crucified. And if I remember correctly, they were crucifying a couple of hundred people a day. A day. Not in total. A day in that siege in 70 AD. That's a lot of crosses. That's a lot of people that are slowly dying on you got to realize, and being crucified was one of the most derogatory ways to die. Like the worst of the worst criminals went that way. That's not an honorable way to die. That is the most dishonorable way to die. And we're going to learn more about that as we get into the New Testament, of course, with the Savior. But this is similar depiction. So he's drawn this out. He's put the pan on it, basically, to show this as a sign to, guys, this is what it's going to be like. This is what's going to happen, just so you know. Verse 4, lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it. According to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. So let's look at verse 4 for a little bit here. Okay, let's understand this a little more. Okay, so you're going to have to change what you normally do. That's what he's saying. Lie on your left side, lay the iniquity of the house of Israel, so the tile on it, meaning you're on your left side, lay this on top of you. According to the number of days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. And so this is representative of how long this is going to take for them to come out of this. So it's going to be uncomfortable. This is going to be an uncomfortable position for Ezekiel to lie in. So he's out in the public area where people can see him, and he's drawn the picture on the tile. He's got the pan to kind of cover it or kind of put it between him and them. He's laying on his left side. He's bearing, this is the symbol of him bearing the iniquity of the people, basically. Verse 5, for I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days. So shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. So Ezekiel is asked to lay on his left side in public for 390 days. Now we know on our calendar, we use more of a solar calendar, 365 days is 1 year. So he's going a little more than a year. This is his job for the next 13, 14, like 14 months, I think, 14, almost 15 months. He's laying aside with this in public and let everybody see it. That was his job. That would be pretty wild to do. You know, you're like, okay, here we go. Let's do this. Day one. Let's get started. You know, by the end of the first day, you're like, I'm sore. My left side hurts. Oh, this is bad. The sun's hot. It's, oh man, what do I do? You know, this is all the seasons. This is all the things going on. But he's to do this to, again, be some kind of an example to the people of, what is Ezekiel doing? That's so weird. What's going on? Oh, he's trying to illustrate. He's catching their attention. I'm demonstrating to help you understand what's coming. Here's what's going to happen. If the Jews don't repent over in Jerusalem, here's what's going to happen. This is what's coming. Now, verse 6, and when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. So now this is switching again. So let's look into some of the symbolism here. This is coming out of the Old Testament study manual. They say the symbolic meaning of the act seems clear enough. Ezekiel was to be fettered to the bed. In verse 8, he's going to talk about this. And bound down to show that the two kingdoms were bound down or brought into bondage because of their iniquity. But whether Ezekiel actually performed this act is not known. It seems strange the Lord would ask a prophet to lie immobile for 15 months. Perhaps Ezekiel performed the act in some kind of a symbolic way. Why the numbers 390 and 40 were used is not clear. So 390 is the number of years for their iniquity. He did the number of days. Then 40 was the number of years, again, on a different way of their iniquity. Though Ezekiel was told that each day represented a year, the years do not fit any known history. So we can't line those up. Now, Kyle and Delich, in their Bible commentary, attempted this. They said using the total of 430 days, or 39 plus 40, suggested that this is the number of years Israel was in bondage in Egypt. If you look in Exodus 12, verses 40 and 41, they explain that the split of 390 days and 40 days as a referring to the 40 years after Moses killed the Egyptian and fled into the wilderness of Midian. This time, just before Moses returned to deliver them, was probably the most intense period of suffering for Israel. Others, however, believe that 430 years included the time from Abraham to the Exodus. So without a revealed key for interpreting these numbers, one cannot definitively interpret this passage. So we don't know, but it could be representative, again, of past suffering that Israel has gone through, realizing that laying on your side, that's representing the past suffering. Here's Jerusalem. They're going to be sieged. This is what's going to happen to Jerusalem here in the near future. Verse 7, therefore, Thou shalt set thy face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and thine arm shall be uncovered, and thou shalt prophesy against it. So remember, when he's on his left side, he was supposed to be away from it. But on his right side, he's towards it. Verse 8, and behold, I will lay bands upon thee, and thou shalt not turn thee from one side to another, till thou hast ended the days of thy siege. So he's going to be, the people are probably going to tie him down, think he's crazy. We need to stop him. We're going to tie him down, and they end up fulfilling the prophecy at the same time. Verse 9, take thou also unto thee wheat, and barley, and beans, and lentils, and millet, and fitches, or spelt, which is a type of wheat, and put them in one vessel, and make thee bread thereof, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon thy side, 390 days thou shalt eat thereof. So you may have heard of something called Ezekiel bread. It's kind of common in a lot of modern Christian circles, this idea of Ezekiel bread, a special recipe for making bread. This is where that comes from. This is the Ezekiel bread recipe, basically. So take wheat. Now, this is not, when it says wheat, there's different kinds of wheat that's out there, like spelt is a type of wheat that's there. This could be more of a kamut or an einkorn, possibly. This is not dwarf wheat that we eat today that is all starch. You've got to go back to more original wheat, which is more high protein. And you take barley, okay, which is more starch, and beans, okay, so these are probably like your black beans or red beans or things like that. Lentils, which are like peas, and millet, which is a non-grain. It's kind of like a grain. It's little small round balls, kind of like a grain, but not like a. It's a different than wheat. Basically, they have different vitamins and things in them, which is good. And fitches, which is spelt, which is a type of wheat as well. So several types of wheat, millet, beans, lentils, and you're going to stick them all together, grind them all up into a powder, and then you're going to make bread with this. Now, back then, they did unleavened bread, so that means no yeast. We use yeast in our bread today, so it rises and gets fluffy. It has all the little air bubbles and stuff in it, because those are the gases coming off from the fermentation with the yeast and eating the starches and things like that. So this is you're making bread with this. So this is a thick, kind of a pancakey type bread. I don't know if you've tried to make Ezekiel bread. If you've tried it, please put in the comments, what was that like making it, and what was it like eating it? Okay, this doesn't sound like the average person is going to be happy about this. This is a thick bread. Now, this is actually a really healthy bread. Real bread should actually be hard to cut. It should be thick and dense, not light and fluffy like we have today. Wheat has been changed over the time. Dwarf wheat, which is most common wheat we have in the America, especially in developed countries today, is not the wheat that they ate even in the early 1800s. Bread is called meat in the scriptures for a reason, because it's thick and dense. It fills you up. Bread today doesn't fill you up. It's just starch, which is just sugar to your body, basically, so it's not really healthy. So this is a really healthy, dense bread, but probably not a favorite of the average person today. Very opposite from them. But this is what he's supposed to eat for his time when he's laying on his side, basically. Now, verse 10, and thy meat, which thou shalt eat, shall be by weight. 20 shekels a day, from time to time shalt thou eat it. This is, again, bread is seen as meat. Okay, that's what it is. This isn't saying, meat in the scriptures isn't always referring to animal products like steak, ground beef, chicken, lamb, those kinds of things. Meat also means bread, but it's this thick, dense bread. It's a really healthy bread. So that's what he's talking about here. Now, verse 11, thou shalt drink also water by measure, the sixth part of an hin, from time to time thou shalt drink. That's not a lot of water. Just it's not a ton. So you're going to eat this thick, dense bread a little bit every so often. You can eat a little bit of it. You're not going to go you're not basically you're going to eat just enough to not die. This is going to be kind of like a famine. You're not eating a lot. Now granted, Ezekiel's just laying down. He's not doing much. So he's not like running around and things. So he's not burning a ton of extra calories. In our modern world, we could look at this and say, okay, if he's laying down, he's not going anywhere, he's still going to burn about 3,000 calories a day. That's just normal. Your body, just so your body can function, if you lay in bed all day long, don't get out of bed at all, your body will actually consume close to 3,000 calories. That's why the recommended daily allowances, the little on the food stuff information on the side of a box is usually, I guess that's usually around about 2,000 calories. So maybe it's more 2,000 calories. Your body will burn that if you do nothing all day long, okay? Because your body needs to function. Your heart needs to pump. Those muscles pump. You need energy to do that. Your brain needs to think. You need energy to do that. You have organs in your body that are processing the food you ate. They need to function. So they're still, the cells in your body are still cleaning and energizing themselves and doing things. That all still takes calories. So even laying down doing nothing burns calories, but he's not going to eat enough calories to replace what his body is burning. So realize the less you move, the less calories you need. The more you move, then you could say there's more calories, but that's a whole other health subject we can talk about another time. So he's basically not eating much, and not he's drinking enough so he doesn't dehydrate. Because you can go 30, almost 40 days without food before you die, before your body starts consuming itself so much that after 30 or 40 days of not eating, you're not going to have a lot of fat stored on your body. Your body will burn through all of its fat, start burning through all of its muscle, and when it gets down to it, it starts burning its own internal organs. And that's when starvation kills you. You die, basically. And so water, though, if you go more than like 4 or 5 days without water, you are going to be in a really bad spot. You need more water than you need food. So he's getting water, but he's also getting a little bit of food. So he doesn't need a ton. So this is going to be enough to keep him alive, basically, for the next 15 months. And then he switches to the other side, 40 more days. So that's about 16 full months. Verse 12, and thou shalt eat it as barley cakes, and thou shalt bake it with dung that cometh out of man in their sight. So, if you want the real Ezekiel bread experience, you're going to make the cakes. This is unleavened bread. You kind of make a pancakey type looking thing out of it. Put it on a stone or have like a stove top or something you can cook on top of, a surface to put this on to cook it. Then you flip it to cook it on both sides. But you're going to heat it not by using wood, not by getting buffalo chips or cow pies like some of the pioneers used to build a fire. You're going to get human poop. And that's what you're going to burn to cook your food, is human poop. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know if you've ever had, that kind of idea of dealing with human feces, but it doesn't smell good. And cooking it's not going to smell good either. And when you cook your food using something that doesn't smell good, your food sometimes gets a little bit of that odor in it. Oh man, that's the real Ezekiel bread experience right there. Holy cow, that's going to be crazy. Now, there's Clark in his Bible commentary book had this to say about this. He says, in times of scarcity, it is customary in all countries to mix several kinds of coarser grain with the finer to make it last longer. This mashlin, which the prophet is commanded to take of wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and fitches, it was intended to show how scarce the necessaries of life should be during the siege. The whole of the above grain being ground was to be formed into one mass, out of which he was to make 390 loaves, 1 loaf for each day, and this loaf was to be of 20 shekels in weight. Now a shekel being in weight about half an ounce. This would be 10 ounces of bread for each day. That's not a lot of bread. That's less than a pound of bread, and that's all he's supposed to eat. Okay, and with this water to the amount of 1/6 part of an hin, which is about a pint and a half of our measure. That's decent water, pint and a half. If you get a pint jar and add a little bit more, that's a good 1 cup of water. Now, in today's modern science, we would say you should be drinking like 5 glasses of water a day to stay fully hydrated. So a glass and a half, or a good sized glass of water a day, you're barely staying alive. Basically, you're not dehydrating, but you're not being really healthy either. You're going to still have problems over time. All this shows that so reduced should provisions be during the siege that they should be obliged to eat the meanest sort of aliment, and that by weight, and their water by measure, each man's allowance being scarcely a pint and a half and 10 ounces, a little more than half a pound of bread for each day's support. So God is telling Ezekiel to go on a famine diet. They're not in the famine yet. They haven't had the siege yet, but he's going to go on a famine diet and say, the people in Jerusalem, this is what they're going to face. Now, if you go look at Jeremiah's, the chapters, when we went through that, the people got so bad that cannibalism became an option. That's how much they were starving. So this is not a lot of food. This is pretty crazy, and he's got to cook it with human poop too. This is, it's not going to be good. Yeah, this is the real Ezekiel Bread experience. So I'm looking forward to your comments on this. Have you tried it for reals? Maybe not cook it with human poop, but even just tried the recipe itself. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. It doesn't sound like it's a very tasty treat, especially on modern terms. It's not going to be anywhere close to, we're not eating a Twinkie or a Hostess cupcake or something here. All right, verse 13, and the Lord said, even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, whither I will drive them. So this is even talking about how they're going to still have hard times as they are scattered. They're still going to be famine and problems. They're going to still eat poorly among the Gentiles. Verse 14, then said I, Lord God. So this is Ezekiel now speaking. Behold, my soul hath not been polluted, for from my youth up even till now have I not eaten of that which dieth of itself, or is torn in pieces, neither came their abominable flesh into my mouth. So this is talking about, again, the idea of the law of Moses says if an animal dies on its own, you don't eat it. If the animal was killed by another animal, you don't eat it. If the animal is forbidden, you don't eat it. And so what Ezekiel's saying here is, I have kept the law of Moses. I have done my best to stay pure my whole life. Verse 15, then he said, so this is the Lord talking to Ezekiel, he said unto me, lo, I have given thee cow's dung for man's dung, and thou shalt prepare thy bread therewith. So a little bit of a reprieve here, because cooking with human poop would defile his food, basically. So verse 15, Clark also made a comment about this as well. He said, dried ox and cow dung is a common fuel in the East, and with this, for want of wood and coals, they are obliged to prepare their food. Indeed, dried excrement of every kind is gathered. Here the prophet is to prepare his bread with dry human excrement. This was required to show the extreme degree of wretchedness to which they should be exposed. For, not being able to leave the city to collect the dried excrement of beasts, the inhabitants during the siege would be obliged literally to use dried human ordure for fuel. The very circumstances show that this was the plain fact of the case. However, we find that the prophet was relieved from using this kind of fuel, for cow's dung was substituted at his request. So this is so Ezekiel's going, okay, God, I'll do this, but this is going to defile my food, and that means I'm going to break by doing what you've asked me to do. I'm going to break the law of Moses, which sounds like, why would you ask me to do something to break your own law? So there's this contrast that he's having. And so God says, Okay, I understand where you're coming from, Ezekiel, so I will let you use cow's dung instead of human dung to do this, so you don't have to violate that. That's a God that's considerate, that's understanding. He's working with Ezekiel on this. That's really good. Now, verse 16, moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, behold, I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem, and they shall eat bread by weight and with care, and they shall drink water by measure and with astonishment. So they're going to have, now this isn't like, oh my gosh, we're eating, oh wow. The astonishment, another way to translate that is fearfulness and anxiety. So they are going to ration their food, and they know when they're rationing their food, this is going to run out, and we are going to be in a bad spot. This is, we're delaying the inevitable by eating, period, but we're going to try to keep ourselves alive, but realize that this is not going to give us strength. We're just going to be barely living, and then when this runs out, that's it. We don't know what to do. Verse 17, that they may want bread and water and be astonied one with another and consume away for their iniquity. So again, the people are going to run out of their food. During the siege, they're going to run out. And like we learn in Jeremiah, some people started resorting to cannibalism. They were eating their own children. They were cooking and boiling kids because they were out of food. They had nothing else to eat but each other. That is a depravity level that is just astonishing that they get to. So Ezekiel's helping the people in this exile realize what is going to happen in Jerusalem. Basically, this is going to be a mess. This is going to be a mess. And this will be interesting because when the people from Jerusalem come to, that survive the captivity, they survive the siege, and they come, and they'll be like, what was it like? Oh, it was so bad. They're going to tell these stories, and everybody's going to be like, Ezekiel mentioned that. Ezekiel talked about just a couple years ago. Wow, he was right. That's crazy. So the agency of these people, and here's the thing to think about. Why is Ezekiel warning the people who are already in exile about what's going to happen in Jerusalem? Because they're not going to be there for all of this. The righteousness of the people, they're still the same people. They've just been separated. There's a few people over here and the most people around Jerusalem. The righteousness of the people can still influence the outcome. Choice is still there. Accountability. There's still some opportunities there. So let's jump over and see in the next chapter as we continue this story.